It's a pleasure to have with us right now the governor of Wisconsin, Governor Scott Walker. How are you, sir?
Hey, Mark, I'm doing all right. A little tired these days from a lot of interviews starting out early, but and running out late. But it's the right thing to do. So every time I get tired, I get another encouraging note, or someone tells me they're praying for me, and it gets us charged up again.
Well, you do have millions and millions of people who are very impressed with what you're doing, sir. Now, why don't you tell us exactly what this debate is about?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. It is a bold political move, and anytime you take on the status quo, it is. But it is a pretty modest request. I think certainly most people in our state, Wisconsin, I think most Americans would agree. What we're asking for is to change collective bargaining for public employees in our state so that no longer would the benefits be a part of that. It would be just narrowed down to the base salary would be the only thing left for collective bargaining. And it's really the reason for that is to balance our budget. We're going to go in and ask for all our state workers, as well as allow local governments to do the same, to get 5.8% for their pension and 12.6% premium for health care. That'll apply to me, my cabinet, apply to my family, apply to everybody in the legislature, as well as our workers out there. And the reason for that is real simple. By doing that, we believe we can save not only $300 million from state employees, but we can save about 4 times that amount from local governments. And we know with a $3.6 billion budget deficit, we've got to cut aid to local government. But unlike what they're doing in New York or California, other places, we want to give our local governments the tools to offset that without cutting teachers and laying people off and doing other things that obviously would be a problem. So simply put, we're balancing our budget. But in doing that, we're saying a little bit more for pension, a little bit more for health care, although well below the national average. Limit what's left in collective bargaining to the base salary. We cap that off at the CPI. And then we say, since there are some significant changes in the unions, we allow each of our workers to have the choice, to really have true free choice as to whether he or she wants to be in a union, and we stop automatically deducting at the state and the local level union dues out of their paychecks, so they can take that $500 or $600, in some cases teachers up to $1,000, and choose to give it to the union if they want, or they can choose, like many of them probably will, to use that to offset their health care and pension contributions. That's what's at stake here. It's bold politically, as you well know, talking about it, but it's pretty modest when compared to the average middle-class taxpayer out there.
And that's really the nub of it, isn't it? Because the unions don't want to lose members. They don't want them to have mobility. They don't want them to be able to speak with their own money and decide, I'm going to opt out.
Well, here's the classic example then. A week ago, the state teachers union, the state AFSCME union head, said, oh my goodness, we can't give 5 and 12% for pension and health care. It'll drive people out of their homes. There's no way our members can afford it. That's absolutely impossible. Over the weekend, suddenly they threw their members under the bus and said, you know what, we'll concede that. Now, as we know very well, that doesn't work because I've got 1,000-plus municipalities, 424 school districts, 72 counties. I can't guarantee that every one of those unions are going to settle for this, so I'm not going to shortchange my local governments. But more importantly, just rhetorically, it shows what they're really interested in is what you just said. They only want the union dues. They don't want that changed, and they don't want people to have the true free choice to make a decision on that. That's what this is all about. That's why the national leaders are coming in. That's why the president stuck his nose in it, even though he certainly has his hands full with the federal budget deficit, should be concentrated on there. That's what's going on here. It's why the national political leaders are in this state, because they know they want their hands on the money. It's not about the people's money. It's about their money.
And this is remarkable, to have teachers saying that this is Egypt. It's quite the opposite. What you're saying is members should have the right to stay with the union or to withdraw from the union and keep that money for themselves. Seems to me we call this choice, don't we?
Well, choice and democracy. And the amazing thing is, I have great respect. There's over 300,000 people that work in government in the state, either at the state or at the local level. The vast majority of whom in the last week have done what they were supposed to do. They went to work. They were good professionals. They're good public servants. They're going to continue through. Obviously, there were several thousand, and a growing number coming in from other states, but tens of thousands of people who decided to skip out, many teachers to come here. They have every right to be heard in the Capitol. But I said I'm not going to allow for 1 minute the voices of the tens of thousands here to somehow overpower the millions of hardworking taxpayers in my state who know what we're asking for is modest because most of them are paying a whole lot more. Now, the good news is not only do the taxpayers get that, but many of those hardworking taxpayers are teachers and city and county and local workers as well as state workers. And we've been getting many responses back, including many from those workers, those government employees who are saying, you know what, you're doing the right thing. I can't speak up and say that. Please don't pass my name on because I'm afraid of what would happen to me. But they're acknowledging that we've got to be honest. Too many years, too many politicians in this state and frankly across the country have ignored the reality that our governments are broke. We got to stop spending, and we're ready to tell the truth and to act on it. And I think that's what people elect us to do: tell the truth, tell people what the problem is, and tell people what your solution is.
And, of course, if they're not happy with you and the Republicans in the legislature, one day they can change all that and go back to their union control and massive deficits and all the rest. So I have a question for you. Have you been threatened at all?
Sure. I think, unfortunately, what we've seen is with all the passion here, we've had threats against a number of elected officials, including, you might expect those who are planning on voting for Republicans, but increasingly now even some of the Democrats. And I've said, the bottom line is the great thing that makes us unlike Cairo and other parts across the world is that's what we fought for. That's what I just welcomed Friday night, 300 men and women who wear the uniforms of the great United States of America, part of our National Guard, back from in many cases, their third deployment overseas to Iraq. That's what these guys lay it on the line for every time they're over there. It's for the freedom for us to get up and express ourselves, to have elections, to follow through on those elections, and to have a free voice in things. And for a handful of nuts to think that they can somehow intimidate people with these ridiculous threats and things of that nature, I think the vast, vast majority of people, no matter where they stand, think that's outrageous, and I think are going to call people out. And the good news was on Saturday we had 70,000 people on both sides of the issue. We had a lot of folks who couldn't come during the week, who had to work, who couldn't take off of work, who came out to support us. Obviously, plenty of other union activists, many from around the country, came in to oppose us. But there were no arrests, there were no problems that rose up out of that. That's the American way. That's the way things are supposed to happen. What's not the American way is what these 14 state Senate Democrats are doing, and that is they're hiding out in another state. I said you cannot participate in democracy if you're not in the arena. And the arena is right here in Madison, Wisconsin. It's not in Chicago. It's not in Rockford, Illinois. It's in Madison, and they should be doing what they are paid to do, what they were elected to do, and that is come and vote on behalf of their constituents.
Are the taxpayers paying for their credit cards and all the rest while they're running around?
Well, they claim that they're not paying for it on taxpayer expense. We would not allow per diems or other things for that regard because that's not official business. The interesting thing that we haven't gotten to the bottom of yet is whether or not those officials are paying for it personally or whether or not some of these national unions are putting up the money. If they are, certainly I think that raises some serious ethical questions about quid pro quo and pay for play and whether or not they're being paid to stay away to avoid this vote. That obviously raises all sorts of legal questions as well. But right now, the state government's not paying for it, and we're looking at the options for what we can do to have some sort of an impact. But the best thing people can do in our state, particularly people who live in those 14 senators' districts, is get on the phone and call them and tell them, we expect you to do your job. Come here and have the courage of your conviction to make your case, to make your argument, but hiding out in another state like you're some sort of a fugitive isn't the way to conduct business.
They were tracked down by some Tea Party guys. It was funny and sick at the same time. They were tracked down at a motel,
Well, they jumped to it because they thought it was somebody from, one of the more liberal networks that was going to empathize with them, and when they realized it was, one of these hardworking taxpayers, suddenly they revolted and pulled back. Again, that's why this is so ridiculous. Come and make the argument, come and make the case, do the job they were elected to do. That's what people expect out there. And the great thing is the Senate Majority Leader, Scott Fitzgerald, who's been stellar throughout this, along with Jeff Fitzgerald, the Speaker of the Assembly. But the Senate Majority Leader went in front of the Organization Committee today, had the other Democratic leaders on the phone, and said he's going to start bringing the Senate back into session tomorrow, not just to bring this up, but to start bringing other non-fiscal items, because you don't need 20 senators to vote on non-fiscal items. And he's going to start bringing up important pieces of legislation that will get the state's economy going again, that they're passionate about. We should be starting to talk about school education reform and expanding our successful school choice program and expanding charter schools and doing all sorts of things that hopefully these 14 state senators will wake up and realize they want to be a part of debating.
By the way, quickly, I'm familiar with your successful school choice program because my foundation, Landmark Legal Foundation, was involved in that litigation many, many years ago.
Absolutely. When I was years ago in the legislature, I was proud to be one of those co-sponsors when my friend Tommy Thompson was pushing education reform.
Yeah.
I talked to Tommy today and said, in the 90s it was education and welfare reform out of Wisconsin. In this generation, in this decade, we're pushing fiscal and budgetary reform, and I think it's what people crave. It's what certainly the feeling I get from people in Wisconsin, and I think similar senses around the country. People in November wanted people who were going to be honest about the fiscal challenges we face, be realistic about our challenges, but also be optimistic about our solutions. And we're optimistic. We've got a way to balance our budget, to not raise taxes, and to get government spending out of control, not only now, but also ultimately to have a commitment to the future so we don't have our kids face the dire consequences they're going to face if we fail to act again now. That's what we're up to. That's what this fight's all about. And, again, we're not going to let a bunch of people come in, a bunch of union leaders and political leaders come in from other states and tell us what we do here in Wisconsin.
By the way, Governor, Rasmussen has a poll out of survey of voters, 48% of likely voters agree with you, 38% agree with the public sector unions, 14% are undecided. I think that's why today Obama's spinners are trying to rewrite history and said, no, he hasn't intervened in Wisconsin.
Oh, they've come in full force. The president actually did a sit-down interview with one of our largest TV stations in Milwaukee where he poked himself into this debate. The reality is his organization's been fully engaged, proudly saying they're bringing people in from Chicago and New Jersey and Pennsylvania and other places. But for us, again, Wisconsin, we're pretty maverick folks. We're pretty independent. We don't like people telling us what to do from outside of our communities and certainly outside of our state. And I think the public is with us, and I think even more so, that poll certainly shows it. But what I found in Wisconsin is when people realize that when you talk about collective bargaining, you're really just talking about allowing local and state governments to put realistic controls in over their budget. You're not talking about taking away employee rights. Our civil service system, which passed back in 1905, is the strongest in the country. Our workers have rights that are not there because of their collective bargaining contracts or union contracts. They're there because of the state law. And I think in the end, even that smaller minority of people who have concerns, when they realize that workers are still going to be protected, they're still going to be treated well, they're just going to have to be like workers nearly everywhere else outside of government and pay a little bit more for the pension, a little bit more for their health care costs. That's a pretty realistic expectation. I've got a brother who's a typical middle-class family. He works as a catering or a banquet manager, I should say, and part-time on the side as a bartender there. His wife works for Sears. They got two beautiful girls, and they rent their home. They're the classic all-Wisconsin, all-American kind of middle-class family. He pointed out to me last weekend he's paying almost $800 a month for his health care and a little bit he can set aside in his 401k. He would love to have the deal that I'm putting on the table, let alone the deal that state and local workers have right now. That's what this is all about. The guys who I visited just a week ago who work at the manufacturing plants I toured all across Wisconsin, the guys with dirt under their hands, who work hard every day, who want nothing more than a chance to put food on the table and clothes on the backs of their kids and take care of their families, live the American dream. They're paying 25 to 50% of their health care premium, and most of them are just thanking God that they got anything to set aside for their retirement. They would love to have a deal like this. This is what it's about. They shouldn't be the ones who get stuck not getting those benefits and yet have to pay the extra taxes to pay for the benefits of public employees. That's just not fair. I have respect for our public employees, but at a time when our nation and our state faces both an economic and a fiscal crisis, we got to balance things out.
Well, Governor Scott Walker, it's been a great pleasure to hear from you, and we really appreciate you doing this, and we do have your back.
Hey, thank you so much, and thanks. I've been hearing it. People have been emailing and calling us. Friday alone, we had 19,000 emails. The overwhelming majority were in favor. And I know you're reaching out to your listeners makes a tremendous impact, and we thank you so much.
Well, God bless you. Keep it up.
All righty.
There he goes, Governor Scott Walker of Wisconsin. I wanted to let him speak without interruption from me because he's extremely articulate. But one of the things that has not been stressed there is the right of union members to opt out. That is the right of teachers to opt out of their local affiliates, among other public employees. This is freedom. We'll be right back.